The metallic sound of pliers cutting the last wire of the surveillance camera echoed through the early morning hours of Millbrook, Virginia. James Wilson, a 58-year-old man with gray hair and hands calloused from decades of working the land, watched the device fall into the tall grass of his property. It was the 12th camera he had encountered that week, all strategically placed along the boundaries of his century-old farm. "This has to stop," he muttered to himself, stowing the pliers in the pocket of his worn jacket. Wilson's Grove, passed down through 4 generations of his family, was now surrounded by a newly built luxury condominium, Oak Ridge Estates. The contrast couldn't be greater. On one side, a historic estate with more than 100 years of apple growing and horse breeding. On the other, standardized mansions with artificially perfect lawns. Linda Davis, president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA, had turned James's life into a nightmare in recent months. It all started when she moved into the mansion closest to the fence that divided the properties. A woman in her 40s, always impeccably dressed and with an artificial smile that didn't reach her cold eyes, Linda quickly took control of the Residents Association with promises to turn the condominium into the most exclusive on the East Coast. James entered his rustic kitchen, where his daughter Rachel, a 32-year-old lawyer, was waiting with a pile of documents spread out on the solid oak table. "I've found another camera, darling." This time pointed directly at my bedroom window. Rachel adjusted her dark-framed glasses and sighed deeply. "That's completely illegal, Dad. They have no jurisdiction over our property, and installing surveillance equipment without consent is a serious breach of privacy." "Try explaining that to Mrs. Davis," James replied, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "Yesterday I received 3 more fines, one for improper maintenance of a hedge, another for visual interference with the landscape harmony of the condominium, and the last," he laughed humorlessly, "for unauthorized breeding of animals in a residential area, as if my farm was part of their condominium." Rachel organized the documents into neat stacks. "The HOA is exceeding all possible legal limits. I've arranged a preliminary hearing with Judge Richardson for next week. He needs to see this." The conflict had escalated rapidly in recent weeks. First came the formal complaints about the rural aspect of Wilson's Grove farm. Then came attempts to force James to sell his property for well below market value. When he refused, the daily fines and the installation of the cameras began. "Dad, you need to see this," Rachel called out, holding up a document with the Oak Ridge Estates logo. "I found it in the public records. The HOA has submitted a request for territorial annexation to the City Council, claiming that our farm poses a risk to the safety and welfare of the condominium residents." James sat down heavily in his favorite chair, the one his late wife Mary used to occupy. "How can they do this? This land has been in our family since 1892. "They can't," Rachel said resolutely. "But we need to act fast. Linda Davis has strong connections in City Hall, especially after her husband, Gregory Davis, was appointed Urban Development Commissioner." A familiar sound interrupted the conversation, the agitated neighing of the horses in the stable. James and Rachel rushed to the window in time to see 3 uniformed men with the Oak Ridge Estates logo crossing the fence towards the animals. "They're doing an unauthorized inspection." Rachel grabbed her phone. "I'm calling Sheriff Martinez. That's trespassing." James was already putting on his boots. "I don't have time to wait for the police. Those horses are more than animals to me. They're part of the family." "Dad, wait!" Rachel tried to stop him, but James was already on his way to the stable. As he approached, he heard Linda Davis's authoritative voice. "Document everything. We need to prove that these animals pose a health risk to our community." "Ms. Davis," James' voice thundered through the stable, "you and your men are trespassing on private property. Leave now." Linda turned slowly, her impeccable blazer contrasting with the rusticity of the surroundings. "Mr. Wilson, we are only exercising our right to protect our community. Your antiquated methods of animal husbandry are incompatible with the standards of Oak Ridge Estates." "This farm is not part of your condominium." James stepped forward, positioning himself between Linda and the horses. "It never has been, and it never will be." That's what we'll see. Linda smiled coldly, gesturing for her men to continue photographing. The city council will vote on our annexation proposal in 2 weeks. I suggest you start packing your things, Mr. Wilson. The era of family farms is over. Millbrook is growing, and people like you need to make room for progress. Rachel arrived at that moment, accompanied by Sheriff Martinez and 2 deputies. Ms. Davis, you are under arrest for trespassing, the sheriff announced. That's absurd, Linda protested as she was escorted out of the stable. My lawyers will be in touch. You have no idea who you're dealing with. After everyone had gone, James hugged his favorite mare, Penny, whom his wife Mary loved so much. Rachel put her hand on his shoulder. I won't let them destroy our legacy, Dad. We're going to fight this with everything we've got. James nodded, watching the sunset through the gaps in the century-old stable. The battle was just beginning, and he knew he would need all his strength and his daughter's help to preserve not only his land, but also the memories and traditions that made Wilson's Grove so much more than just a farm. Rachel Wilson spent the sleepless night going over old farm documents in her makeshift office in the living room. The early hours of the morning brought a discovery that made her eyes light up. Among the papers, yellowed by time, she found an original deed from 1892 that contained a crucial clause about the property's water rights. "Dad!" she called out, running into the kitchen where James was preparing breakfast. "I found something that could change everything." James put down the frying pan with eggs and approached his daughter, who spread the documents out on the kitchen table. "What have you discovered, Rachel?" "The natural spring that supplies all of Oak Ridge Estates. It's located on our property. And according to this original deed, the water rights are exclusively ours. The condominium built by Linda Davis depends entirely on that spring for its supply." A rare smile appeared on James's tired face. "So they need us more than we realized." That same morning, Linda Davis was conducting an emergency HOA meeting in the luxurious Oak Ridge Estates Community Center. The glass walls offered a panoramic view of Wilson's Grove Farm, which she considered a blemish on her perfectly planned real estate empire. "The cameras were destroyed," she informed the board members, her controlled voice barely concealing her frustration. "And Old Man Wilson has filed a formal complaint for trespassing. We need a new strategy." Gregory Davis, her husband and urban development commissioner, intervened. "Honey, maybe we should take a step back. Wilson has influential supporters in the city. That farm of his is practically a heritage site." Linda gave her husband an icy stare. "Heritage. That pile of hay and manure is ruining the market value of our property, and you know very well that we need that land for the expansion of Phase 3 of the condominium." The meeting was interrupted by the arrival of Rachel Wilson, who entered the room with the confidence of someone with an ace up her sleeve. "Ms. Davis, we need to talk." "This is a private meeting," Linda replied, standing up. "Security." "That won't be necessary," Rachel smiled, placing the old deed on the mahogany table. "I've brought something that will surely interest all the owners present." The council members approached as Rachel explained about water rights. Linda's face gradually paled as the reality of the situation became clear. "This is ridiculous," she tried to argue. "Those deeds are too old to be legally valid." "On the contrary," Rachel replied, her professional tone masking her satisfaction. "Water rights are perpetual in Virginia, unless explicitly transferred. And as you can see, there has never been such a transfer." The news spread quickly through the condominium. Concerned residents began to question the HOA's decisions and Linda Davis' leadership. The prospect of losing access to the area's only water source was alarming for a community that prided itself on its perfect gardens and luxurious pools. Meanwhile, at the farm, James received an unexpected visit. Michael Cooper, one of the oldest residents of Oak Ridge Estates, walked through the dividing fence carrying a basket. "Mr. Wilson," he called out, visibly uncomfortable, "I've brought some produce from our community garden, a gesture of goodwill." James watched the man curiously. Michael continued, Not everyone in the condominium supports Ms. Davis's actions. Many of us chose to live here precisely for the view of her farm, for the feeling of being close to nature. The conversation was interrupted by the sound of approaching vehicles. 3 municipal vans were parked near the stable, and Gregory Davis got out of one of them, accompanied by municipal inspectors. "Surprise inspection," he announced, trying to sound authoritative. "We've received complaints about inadequate sanitary conditions." Rachel, who had just returned, was already on the phone to Judge Richardson. James looked at Gregory sternly. "You don't have the authority." "As Urban Development Commissioner, I have every right to investigate possible sanitation violations," Gregory replied, but his voice betrayed uncertainty. "Actually," Michael Cooper intervened, surprising everyone, "as a member of the County Board of Health, I can attest that all regular inspections of Wilson's Grove Farm are up to date. I have the reports in my office." Gregory hesitated, clearly not expecting opposition from a resident of the condominium. Just then, Linda Davis arrived in her luxury SUV, braking sharply at the sight of the situation. "What's going on here?" she demanded to know, marching towards the group. "What's going on?" Rachel replied, hanging up the phone. "Is that I just got a court injunction prohibiting any unscheduled inspections on our property. What's more, Mrs. Davis, Judge Richardson was particularly interested to know about the illegally installed surveillance cameras." Linda stared at her husband, who shrugged helplessly. The city inspectors, sensing the change in the situation, began to return to their vehicles. "This isn't over," Linda warned, her voice shaking with anger. "You can't stop progress." "Progress?" James questioned, his voice calm but firm. "My family has been farming this land for over a century, providing fresh food for the whole region. Our horses help children with special needs through equine therapy. That's progress, Mrs. Davis. Real progress." Michael Cooper and other residents who had approached murmured in agreement. Linda, realizing that she was losing support, quickly left with Gregory in her wake. That evening, as father and daughter gazed at the sunset from the farmhouse veranda, Rachel smiled. "I think we've finally found a way to fight them on equal terms." James nodded, observing some of the residents of the condominium who strolled near the fence, waving amicably for the first time in months. "You know, Rachel, your mother always said that clean water and a clean conscience are the greatest assets anyone can have." "And as always," Rachel replied, "Mom was right. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since the conflict had begun, James Wilson felt he had a real chance of preserving his family's legacy. Wilson's Grove Farm would continue to stand, a living testament that not all progress needs to destroy the past in order to build the future. Judge Richardson's office was a sanctuary of mahogany and leather, where the aroma of old books mingled with the distinctive smell of freshly brewed coffee. Rachel Wilson methodically organized her evidence on the large conference table, while Linda Davis and her corporate lawyer occupied the opposite side. "Gentlemen," Judge Richardson began, adjusting his reading glasses, "we are here to discuss not only the issue of water rights, but also the serious charges of illegal surveillance and harassment." Linda Davis maintained her impeccable posture, but her perfectly manicured nails drummed nervously on the folder of documents in front of her. Her lawyer, Maxwell Sterling III, cleared his throat before speaking. "Your Honor, Oak Ridge Estates is simply exercising its right to protect the interests of its residents. The Wilson property poses a risk." "A risk?" Rachel interrupted, pulling a red folder from her briefcase. "I have reports here from the last 5 years showing that Wilson's Grove Farm not only meets but exceeds all of the county's environmental and health standards. In addition," she paused dramatically, "we've discovered something interesting about the Oak Ridge Estates approval process." Linda's face paled slightly. Rachel continued, "The original environmental impact studies for the condominium were based on the premise that they would have perpetual access to the Wilson Farm water source. However, there is no formal agreement or compensation in place. As the hearing unfolded in court, James received an unexpected visitor at the farm. Catherine Martinez, the sheriff's wife and local historian. showed up carrying several boxes of files. "Mr. Wilson," she called out, her eyes shining with the excitement of an important discovery. "I've found something in the municipal archives that you need to see." James helped her carry the boxes into the kitchen, where Catherine began spreading yellowed documents across the table. These are the original plans for the development of this area, dating back to 1890. And look at this. She pointed to a specific marking on the map. There is a historic preservation clause that has never been revoked. Your farm isn't just a private property. It's been officially designated as a historic and environmental preservation area since 1893. In court, Rachel's revelation about the environmental impact studies caused a considerable uproar. Judge Richardson removed his glasses, massaging his temples. "Ms. Davis, was your association aware of these facts when you initiated the annexation process?" Before Linda could answer, the courtroom doors opened. Michael Cooper entered, followed by a group of Oak Ridge Estates residents. "Your Honor, we request permission to present additional evidence as affected residents." Linda Davis spun around in her chair, glaring at her traitorous neighbors. Michael, ignoring her intimidation, approached the judge. "We have discovered that Ms. Davis and her husband rigged the HOA votes," he declared, handing the judge a folder. "Many of us never approved of these actions against Wilson Farms. In fact, several homeowners chose Oak Ridge Estates specifically for the view of the historic farm." Rachel's phone vibrated with a message from her father about Catherine's discovery. Her eyes widened as she read the content. "Your Honor, I request a brief pause. We have just received crucial information about the historical status of the property." As the court went into recess, Linda Davis pulled her lawyer into a corner. "Do something," she hissed. "Our entire investment in Phase 3 depends on that land." "Linda," Maxwell replied quietly, "maybe it's time to consider a strategic retreat. If that historic designation is confirmed—" "Retreat?" she interrupted him. "I built Oak Ridge Estates from scratch. I'm not going to let a stubborn farmer and his lawyer daughter destroy it." Rachel took advantage of the recess to call Catherine, who quickly scanned and sent the historical documents. When the session resumed, she was armed with a new legal perspective. "Your Honor," Rachel began, "in addition to the issues already presented, I would like to submit additional evidence demonstrating that Wilson's Grove Farm has legally been a historic and environmental preservation area since 1893. Judge Richardson examined the new documents with growing interest. Linda Davis whispered something angrily to her lawyer, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. "Ms. Davis," the judge finally said, "your association is facing serious charges of harassment, illegal surveillance, and attempted misappropriation of protected property. In addition, evidence suggests vote rigging and bad faith in the actions of the HOA." Linda stood up abruptly. "Your Honor, I request time to consult with my attorneys and prepare an appropriate response to these new allegations." "Granted," the judge replied. "But in the meantime, I am issuing a court order prohibiting any action by the HOA against the Wilson property, including fines, inspections, or annexation attempts. I am also ordering the immediate removal of any surveillance equipment." When Rachel returned to the farm that afternoon, she found her father and Catherine Martinez still poring over historical documents in the kitchen. James looked up, a tired but satisfied smile on his face. "How was it?" he asked. Rachel smiled, leaving her briefcase on the table. "Linda Davis has finally encountered an obstacle that she can't simply ignore or intimidate. The judge is on our side, Dad." Catherine pointed to an old photo she had found, showing Wilson's Grove Farm in 1895. "Look at this. Your family wasn't just farming the land, they were preserving an important piece of Millbrook's history." James picked up the photograph carefully, recognizing his great-grandfather next to the first stable. "Mary would love to see this," he murmured, thinking of his late wife. "She always said this farm had soul." Outside, the sun was beginning to set over Wilson's Grove, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. The horses were grazing quietly, oblivious to the legal and political battles taking place. The farm stood as it always had, a silent testament to the persistence of tradition in the face of change, a reminder that not all progress needs to come at the expense of the past. A pile of confidential documents landed with a thud on Rachel Wilson's desk. Michael Cooper, now a crucial ally in the fight against Linda Davis, had just handed over what seemed to be the key to unraveling the whole scheme behind Oak Ridge Estates. "I found this in Gregory Davis's office," Michael explained, his voice betraying nervousness. "As treasurer of the HOA, I had access to some restricted files. What I found, well, you need to see for yourself." Rachel began examining the papers, her eyes widening as she absorbed the information. "This is much bigger than we imagined," she muttered. "Linda Davis isn't just trying to take our farm, she's involved in a real estate fraud scheme that stretches across the entire county." The documents revealed a disturbing pattern. Oak Ridge Estates was just one piece in a larger puzzle. Linda and Gregory Davis had systematically manipulated property appraisals, falsified environmental reports, and bribed public officials to build their real estate empire. At the farm, James received an unexpected visit from Eleanor Blackburn, a 78-year-old woman who had lost her historic property to the Davises 2 years earlier. "When I saw in the papers that you were taking on Linda Davis, I knew I had to come," she explained, sitting on the veranda with a cup of tea trembling in her wrinkled hands. "They used the same tactics on me," Eleanor continued. "First the cameras, then the fines, then the surprise inspections. When I refused to sell, the mysterious accidents began. An accidental barn fire, vandalized equipment." James felt a shiver run down his spine. The night before, he had found suspicious tamper marks on the farm's irrigation system. Rachel arrived just then, carrying Michael's documents. After hearing Eleanor's account, her expression hardened. "Mrs. Blackburn, would you like to give an official statement?" "Darling, I'm ready to shout the truth from the rooftops," Eleanor replied with determination. "I've already lost my land, but perhaps I can help save yours." Meanwhile, at Oak Ridge Estates, a stormy meeting was taking place in Linda Davis's office. "What do you mean the documents are gone?" she shouted at Gregory. "That folder had everything. The agreements with the appraiser, the modified reports." "Someone must have broken into the office," Gregory replied, loosening his tie. "Linda, maybe we should consider." "Don't even finish that sentence," she cut in. "I built all this from scratch. Nobody's going to stop me now, especially not a stubborn farmer and his lawyer daughter." What Linda didn't know was that, at that very moment, Rachel was meeting with District Attorney Marcus Henderson, presenting not only the documents found by Michael, but also a series of statements from other victims Eleanor had helped locate. "This is pure dynamite," Henderson commented, leafing through the files. "Systematic fraud, bribery, intimidation. Ms. Wilson, you've just handed me the case of the year." The next morning, the Millbrook community woke up to the headline on the front page of the local newspaper. "Real Estate Imperial under investigation. Fraud scheme exposed." The photo of Linda and Gregory Davis leaving a city council meeting in a hurry took center stage. James was feeding the horses when he heard the sound of breaking glass coming from the main house. Rushing inside, he found a stone wrapped in an ominous note. "Accidents happen on old farms all the time." Rachel documented the threat and immediately contacted Sheriff Martinez, who increased patrols in the area. Michael Cooper organized a group of Oak Ridge Estates residents to hold a volunteer vigil, demonstrating that the community was changing sides. "Dad," Rachel said that night, as they examined the security cameras they had installed, "we need to be extremely careful right now. Linda Davis is cornered, and desperate people do desperate things." As if to confirm her words, an alert sounded on the security system. On the cameras, 3 hooded figures were moving stealthily towards the main stable. "They won't give up easily," James muttered, already dialing the sheriff. The final showdown was approaching. and both James and Rachel knew that the next 24 hours would be crucial, not only for the future of Wilson's Grove farm, but for exposing a network of corruption that had controlled Millbrook for years in the shadows. Eleanor Blackburn, watching the movement from the balcony, squeezed James's hand. "You know, young man, sometimes we need to lose something precious to find our true strength." "But you and Rachel, you found your strength just in time." The lights of police cars began to flash in the distance, and the Wilsons prepared for another night of vigil, protecting not just a property, but a legacy of honesty and perseverance that no amount of money or power could buy. The early hours of the morning at Wilson's Grove were interrupted by the shrill sound of the fire alarm. James woke up startled, the smell of smoke already invading the century-old house. Through the second-floor window, he saw the orange flames dancing in the main stable. "Rachel!" he shouted, running down the corridors. His daughter was already on her feet, phone in hand. "The firemen are on their way," she informed him, coming down the stairs. "And so is Sheriff Martinez." James didn't wait. He ran to the stable, his heart hammering in his chest. The desperate neighing of the horses echoed in the night. Michael Cooper and other residents of Oak Ridge Estates, who were keeping a voluntary vigil, were already at the scene, trying to control the flames with garden hoses. "Horses first," James ordered, bursting through the side door. The smoke was thick, but he knew every inch of the place. Rachel and Michael followed him, leading the frightened animals out. As they fought against time, a figure emerged from the shadows. Linda Davis, still in her impeccable suit even at that hour, watched the scene with a cold smile. "What a tragedy," she commented, loud enough to be heard. "Accidents happen all the time on old farms, don't they?" Rachel, covered in soot, spun on her heels. "How dare you!" Before she could go any further, Sheriff Martinez arrived with his vehicles, followed by the fire trucks. "Linda Davis," he announced, "you are under arrest for the crime of arson." "That's absurd," she protested, backing away. "You have no proof." "Actually," Michael Cooper intervened, raising his phone, "we do. Security cameras captured everything, including your henchman throwing accelerant over the stable walls. And I have here," he showed an envelope, "the proof that you ordered the attack." Linda tried to run, but was stopped by the deputies. While she was being handcuffed, Gregory Davis arrived in his luxury car, accompanied by FBI agents. Linda Davis, one of the federal agents, approached. "You are also being arrested for real estate fraud, extortion, and conspiracy. We have a federal warrant." The firefighters managed to control the fire before it completely destroyed the stable. Miraculously, all the horses were saved, although the historic building suffered significant damage. The next morning, the Millbrook community gathered at Wilson's Grove. Dozens of residents from Oak Ridge Estates and the town came to offer their help to rebuild the stable. Among them was Eleanor Blackburn, who watched the scene with tears in her eyes. "You know," she told James, "when I lost my property to the Davises, I thought I'd lost everything. But seeing this today, people coming together against injustice, I realize I've gained something much more valuable." Rachel coordinated the volunteers, organizing teams to clean up the wreckage and salvage what they could. Prosecutor Henderson showed up mid-morning, carrying more documents. "Investigations have revealed a scheme that stretches across 3 states, he reported. "Linda and Gregory Davis built an empire based on fraud and intimidation. But most importantly, we found evidence to reverse several fraudulent acquisitions, including their estate, Ms. Blackburn." Eleanor covered her mouth with her hands, overcome with emotion. "After 2 years. It will take time," Henderson continued. "But we will ensure that justice is done for all the victims." While the teams worked on the reconstruction, James found something among the rubble, an old, partially scorched wooden plaque that his wife Mary had carved years ago. It read, "Wilson's Grove, where roots grow deep and memories flourish." "She always knew, didn't she?" Rachel said, putting her hand on her father's shoulder. "Mom always said that this land was more than a property. It was a legacy of resistance." In the afternoon, the city council held a special emergency session. James and Rachel were invited to attend when the mayor officially announced that Wilson's Grove would be designated as a protected historic landmark, guaranteeing its preservation for future generations. Michael Cooper, now interim president of the Oak Ridge Estates HOA, proposed an unprecedented partnership. The condominium would help maintain the farm, and in return, James would continue to provide clean water from the natural spring and allow children in the community to participate in educational programs about sustainable agriculture. Maybe, Michael suggested, it's time to build bridges instead of walls. Over the following weeks, as the stable was rebuilt with the help of the community, James realized that his farm had become more than a symbol of resistance. It was now an example of how a community can unite against injustice and greed. Linda and Gregory Davis would face years in prison, and their real estate empire would be dismantled. Eleanor Blackburn would get her historic property back, as would other victims of the scam. But the real victory, James realized, was not just in legal justice, but in the transformation of the community. On a quiet afternoon, watching the horses graze in the renovated fields, James found Rachel on the porch, going over the plans for a new community program on the farm. "You know, Dad," she smiled. "Mom used to say that sometimes you have to go through a storm to appreciate the rainbow." James nodded, his gaze roaming the property his family had farmed for over a century. The surveillance cameras had been replaced by birds' nests. The fences that once divided them now supported flowering vines. And where there had once been tension and fear, something new was now growing: hope. Wilson's Grove survived because we were not alone in the struggle, he reflected. And now let's make sure it stays that way, a place where the past and the future can coexist in harmony. The sun was setting over the farm, painting the sky with shades of hope, as a new era dawned for Wilson's Grove and the entire Millbrook community.